We are now live. Welcome to the March meeting of the Overview and Audit Committee of Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes Fire Authority. I would like to start by confirming that this meeting is being live streamed on the Buckinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service YouTube channel. Following the meeting, a recording will continue to be available on this channel, and it is also being recorded should there be any technical difficulties. I'd just like to remind members of 4 key points. First, please mute your microphone and turn off your camera when not speaking. Second, feel free to turn off incoming video, as this may help if you have a weak connection. Thirdly, if you wish to speak during the meeting, please turn on your camera to indicate a wish to ask a question or make a comment. The chairman will be notified of all members who have switched on their videos. When the chairman does invite you to speak, please unmute. Finally, when voting, members will be asked only to indicate if they wish to vote against or to abstain from a vote. Where this is the case, the chairman will ask you to switch on your camera to indicate that you wish to do so. These will be monitored and brought to the chairman's attention. If you do not switch on your video, this will be taken as silent assent. Now, before I hand over to the chairman, for the benefit of viewers of the webcast, Katie Nellis, the Democratic Services Officer, will read the list of members in surname alphabetical order. Please turn on your camera and unmute to respond when your name is called.
Okay, thank you, Graham. Councillor Carroll.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Christensen.
Present.
Councillor Cole.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Exon.
Right.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Hussain. I can see you anyway. Thank you.
Present.
Councillor Mallon.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Mills. I think he may be a bit late. Councillor Minns.
Present.
Thank you. And Councillor Stutchbury.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Chairman.
I will start the meeting. Can I just firstly thank the members for supporting this committee over the time, and I do value your support and your comments throughout that time. So can I thank you, the members, for giving me support. So I can start the meeting. Any apologies?
There's none, Chairman. It's just Councillor Mills might be a bit late.
Okay, thank you. Number 2 is minutes of the last meeting. Any observations?
None indicated, Chairman.
Declarations of interest or disclosure, any?
Chairman, shall we just we probably just ask members if they wish to approve the minutes for signing? So if any member wishes, if any member wishes to vote against or abstain the signing of the minutes, please indicate. That motion is carried, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Move on to item 3, disclosure of interest.
None, Chairman.
Item 4, questions.
None, Chairman.
Item 5, IIPA policy. Is that noted? Is that right, Graham?
Yes, Chairman. This is a standing item following an inspection by the Office of the Surveillance Commissioner, recommending that we regularly inform members if we have had to use our powers under the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act. We've never had to had recourse to those powers, so therefore no inspections have been required. We are still subject to the REPA regime, but the Surveillance Commissioner has indicated that he is unlikely to commission any investigations into fire and rescue authorities because we do not use those powers. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions? Robin?
Yeah, thank you. Just because it's something internal, could the officer give an explanation what the powers are with that and what it actually does? Because it's not, if you were watching, you wouldn't know what it was. just a brief explanation about it. It's not a question about the decision. I think it's important that we seem to understand what the powers are within that.
I'm happy to answer that question, Chairman. Yes, we are the enforcing authority for fire safety under the Regulatory Reform Order, and as an enforcing authority, we are granted powers to undertake what's known as covert surveillance on premises, and this would be on premises, for example. But we are quite capable of exercising all our enforcement duties under the Regulatory Reform Act without the need to undertake any covert surveillance. So, does that assist?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's just that anyone watching wouldn't quite know what it was, and it's important.
Indeed.
Thank you very much.
Wendy, any question? She's muted. Oh, okay. Right, we move on. Item 6, external audit plan. I believe we got a verbal update from Mr. Young. Is that right, Graham? Neil.
Yeah, I think Neil Harris will begin, Chairman.
Hi, Neil.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members of the committee. So the purpose of this verbal update is just to bring members of the committee up to date on our external audit timetable for the audit of the Fire and Rescue Authority's financial statements for the 2020-2021 audit. At this point in time, typically we would have presented to you an audit plan that sets out our audit strategy and how we're responding to the audit risks that we're seeing through the planning work that we've undertaken. Members of the committee may be aware that nationally there are a number of outstanding 1920 external audits that are impacting on all audit suppliers at the moment, both to take account of the impact from COVID-19 and the changes in the reporting timetables that took place last year. Because of that, we're only just in the process of commencing our planning work at the Fire and Rescue Authority this month. So we have started our routine planning and walkthrough procedures at the moment. And once that work and our team meetings have concluded, we'll be in a position to confirm our proposed assessment of audit risks and response ahead of receiving the draft accounts for audit. Members of the committee may be aware that MHCLG have been responding to the Sir Tony Redmond review into this sustainability of financial reporting and external audit in England. And off the back of that, they're proposing the timetable for the production of draft accounts and external audit for the 2021 financial year. And those proposals are that the authority has up until the 1st of August to produce draft accounts for publication, and the target date for the audited financial statements is the end of September. Our current scheduling of external audits is ongoing at the moment, but our proposal for the audit of the Fire and Rescue Authority's financial statements is that we would be undertaking our substantive audit at the end of May for a period of 4 weeks. So we are anticipating that we will be concluding our audit in a very reasonable period of time, and are confident that we can conclude our audit by the publication dates that MHCLG are proposing for this year of the end of September. Based on our conclusion of the 1920 audit and the environment that we are working in at the moment, it is fair to say that I don't anticipate any significant changes in our audit approach this year compared to where we finished last year. So I do anticipate that there will still be a focus on the assumptions associated with the valuations of your assets and any uncertainties that are expressed by your valuer and how we respond to that during the course of the audit. Our assessment of the appropriateness of your going concern disclosure notes, focus on any key decisions that are taken during the course of the 2021 financial year. The Blue Light Hub is now operational, so the recognition of that in your financial statements and the appropriate valuation of that asset will be an area that we'll be focusing on as well this year. And I propose, Chairman, that at the next meeting of your committee, we bring our proposed planning document to that meeting ahead of our audit of the financial statements. So with that, that's my overview of where we are on the audit, and I'm obviously happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that really good report. In fact, yes, I totally agree with what you say about Blue Light Hub, and you can come to the next meeting whenever it's going to be. Robin?
Thank you, Chairman. Through you, just a point of clarity. When the audit comes forward, because of the decisions unanimously taken to show the possibility of having a referendum. Is that something which will be audited because it's a planned expenditure in case of necessity, or would that be not audited because it's a accruement of a large amount of money, and also it's against the backdrop which the authority set its precept with? And will those figures be in the public in the sense that we need to keep that live because of the topic, and if not, why not? And because that was an important decision taken in the background of foreign reserves and money which we hadn't accrued or couldn't accrue. And it was, proposed by the chairman and seconded by Councillor Peter Manley at the time. Will that appear in the accounts, or would that be something that wouldn't?
Mark, do you want to come into this one? He's on mute. Mute.
Oh, sorry. Hopefully you can hear me now.
Thank you.
Right, sorry about that.
That's fine.
Okay, so thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. So in terms of the amount that we're setting aside for a referendum I should say a possible referendum in future years, the decision was made at the Fire Authority to do a transfer from an existing reserve to a new reserve of £600,000. So that will appear as a separate reserve in the accounts, so it will be available for the public to see, and it will be picked up as part of the audit, who will check that we've made that transfer in line with the decision that the Fire Authority took at the time.
And I'm presuming with that there would be background information which supports that decision. Naturally, it was a decision that the authority was forced to have to take. It wasn't one that they wanted to take, I expect. Would that be the case, Mark?
Yeah, for every single reserve we have, there is a note explaining what the purpose of the reserve is, why it was created, and what it's going to be used for. So all that background information will appear in the accounts alongside the amount that we've set aside.
The reason for asking is the new authority will come in and there'll be an election, and there may be different members look at it. Just want reassurance that the explanation's there, and you've given me that, and I'm really grateful for that. Thank you very much, Mark.
No, you're welcome, Councillor.
Thank you much. We got Councillor Hussain on the screen. I'm not sure if there's going to be a question.
I've got no question. Sorry. Oh, I'm on the screen. Sorry.
That's fine. Thanks. Maggie, you're on the screen. Do you want to come out with a observation?
No, sorry, Chairman. I've just put my camera on because I'm the next item.
Okay. Any other questions? So thank you, Neil, for that. And I believe, Graham, we just note the report.
That's correct, Chairman.
Everybody agree? Looks like we do.
Yeah, no dissenting voices, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Item 7, internal audit reports, final audit reports. Maggie.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everybody. I'm Maggie Gibb, the Head of Business Assurance and Chief Auditor for Buckinghamshire Council. Before I hand over to the audit team who have delivered the work to present the papers, I just really wanted to take the opportunity to thank Mark Hemming and his team and all the other officers involved in the internal audits for this year. It's obviously been an extraordinary year for all of us. And we've had to adapt the way that we've actually delivered the audit plan, but I'm pleased to say that we have got there. We've delivered everything that we had planned to deliver, which I think is a huge achievement given the circumstances that we've been finding ourselves in. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Selina Harlock, who's the audit manager, who's been responsible for the delivery of the work.
Thank you, Maggie. So, members, I'm just going to take you through, firstly, the final audit reports that we've delivered for the year 2021. So that's paper 7A. And in this paper, we're just highlighting to you the findings that we've raised in all our finalised audit reports. As Maggie said, we've delivered the whole plan, which consisted of 4 audits, core financial controls, which had a substantial opinion, Gdpr had a partial audit opinion, the assurance management system, which had a partial opinion, and the resources management application audit, which also had a partial opinion. What I'll do is I'll just run through all the appendices, which are the actual final reports, and then I'll leave it to the end for any questions, as there are quite a few papers in there. So Appendix A,
Thank you.
Appendix A, which is on page 25 of your pack, is the core financial controls audit. This audit considered the controls in place at the time of the audit only, and we reviewed 10 key risk areas. We only raised 2 medium and 1 low priority finding in this report, and therefore resulted in a substantial opinion, as we found no material weaknesses in there. The 2 medium findings related to payroll, and the 1 low priority finding related to P cards. I'll take you through to the next appendix, which is Appendix B on page 51 of your pack, and that's the GDPR audit. In this audit, we reviewed 5 key risk areas and raised 5 findings. 1 was high, 3 were medium, and 1 had a low priority. The overall opinion for this audit was partial, as we found some control areas that were not being operated effectively. We have agreed actions to address these weaknesses, and as part of our process, we will follow up and report back to this committee to make sure those are implemented within the agreed timescales. The next paper is Appendix C, and again, that's on page 68 of your paper pack. That's the asset management system audit. In this audit, we've concluded with a partial assurance opinion, as we've raised 6 high priority findings, 4 medium findings. The audit reviewed 8 key risk areas, and as part of that review, we actually attended, or rather, auditor attended one of the fire stations as part of the stock review, and our conclusion found that there are inadequate levels of internal control in place, and we have agreed some actions to address these, and will monitor implementation. However, in addition to this, due to the high risk findings, we will also be undertaking further work in this area for the year 21-22, which we have proposed in agenda item 7C, which we'll come to later on. Appendix D, which is on page 91, this is the resources management application. This was an IT audit, actually, that was undertaken by IT specialist auditors. In their review, they've looked at 3 risk areas and raised 8 audit findings, which resulted in a partial assurance opinion. The actions for these, again, we have agreed with officers and management, and we will monitor implementation against the timescales. I'll pause here for any questions regarding any of the papers.
Any questions? Robin?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chairman, just a brief explanation, page 82. It's quite a big statement about the assets and accrued records and stocks. It appears that it's being audited and it's being looked at, but could I have a brief explanation of what that actually incurs and whether you see that as a significant risk going forward, because it is actually marked red?
I think if it's okay, can I pass that on to the Director of Finance, Mark, if you're able to, if you'd like to answer that?
Mark?
Yeah, certainly happy to pick that one up. So this follows on from an audit of stores we had previously in the last financial year, which identified a similar issue. Unfortunately, with COVID coming along, stores was one of the issues that's been impacted the most in terms of working arrangements, and just trying their hardest to, in the initial stages, to secure enough PPE and supplies of hand sanitizer, etc. So our project to rectify this, unfortunately, hadn't moved on as fast as we would have liked. The system's been in place for a while now, but we have noticed that we now get to the stage where some of the hardware is starting to reach the end of its useful life. So we're looking at replacing the scanners, which are cause of some of the issues, and also some of the assets that have been barcoded. The barcodes are now starting to fall off, so they need to be re-barcoded. So we're getting a project in place to do that over the coming financial year. So hopefully that will rectify a lot of the issues. And as Selina also said, some of the work which she will look at in the next agenda item, which is the audit plan, we're looking at some of the process mapping as well, especially where processes cut across departments, and some of that extra value adding work will identify opportunities to improve those processes. to ensure our stock records are as accurate as possible going forwards.
Thank you very much. Why I'm just to say turning on and off, are you able to answer the service review, the question on service review, because it's risk as high, and that's on page 97. Now, I think that's probably similar problems as you've got with COVID and being able to actually administer these things in a timely and orderly fashion because of what you've experienced in the fire service having to concentrate on many other things. I don't think that, I'm not seeing it as a complete risk, but just an explanation of what it means would be much appreciated. I'm not concerned, I'm just interested.
Okay, yeah, so the service review, so this relates to the resource management application audit, which looks at the fire service rota system, which is the system we use essentially to record who's on duty, what skills they've got, what availability is like, etc. So this is a new system that's been recently introduced. So the issues highlighted in this report are consistent with kind of what I'd expect to see with a new system. So this one isn't saying that kind of there is no kind of cyber security or there is no backup, etc. It's just saying we need to go and just get explicit kind of assurance from the vendor that that is in place. So that's something we'll be writing to them shortly to get that assurance around. We're confident it is there, but we just need it kind of verbalised, I think.
Oh, thank you very much for flagging these things up to us. It's very much appreciated, and thank you very much for your answers.
Wendy?
Thank you. Regarding those 4 reds, were you having those on the back burner thinking, oh, we must do something about that? Or was it a surprise, regardless of COVID problems, that you would be having this red highlighted?
I don't think any of it came as a surprise. As I mentioned before, we have had a previous stores audit where it raised similar issues, and we have started the work to do it. Just with the COVID pressures that have come along, we haven't been able to move it as far along as we would have liked. And also some of the issues around being able to do a stock take, that was purely, we deferred that as a conscious decision because what I didn't want to do, although I really wanted to do a stock take, obviously the priority and health and safety of our staff comes first. I didn't want to put 2 or 3 people in a confined space and put them at risk in order to do that. So that is something we'll do this year. Now we're much more aware of kind of the precautions that need to be taken, and we're able to do it in a COVID safe way.
And do you think this will be a green next year?
That's what we're working towards. So as Selena says, these will be monitored going forwards. We're putting in place an action plan to deal with these. You'll see there's management responses about how and when we're going to deal with these. So I'd fully expect these to work towards being okay when the audit do they revisit during the coming year.
Jolly good, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Appears not. Graham, can you put the recommendation?
Thank you, Chairman. The recommendation is at page 23 in members' agenda pack. It is that the recommendations raised in the finalised internal audit reports be noted. Can members indicate if they wish to vote against or abstain that recommendation? Chairman, that resolution is carried.
Thank you very much. Thank you much, members. Can we move on to page 107? If you can get to that one. And we
Thank you, Chair.
So can we move on to that one? Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is item 7B, and the purpose of this paper is to update members on the progress of the implementation of the audit recommendations that we've raised. On page 109 of your pack, we're showing the status of the audit actions. There are currently only 5 actions that are overdue, and internal audit continues to monitor and work with officers to ensure these are implemented. However, due to COVID, this has impacted on progress this year, but we have no concerns, and there's nothing material that we're concerned about that's not been addressed as yet. And we hope to be in a better position that these will be closed for next year. And that's it on that paper if you have any questions.
Any questions? I believe not. So Graham can... Oh, Robin.
I think that the question was answered in the previous report on page 111, where it says the asset review and its equipment at the bottom of the page. Is that the answer for that would be the same as the previous answer which was given, wouldn't it? Because it's indirectly linked. Would that be correct?
Yes, Councillor Stutchbury. So that findings regarding the stores audit we undertook last year, and then this year we've done the asset management. Again, they're closely linked. And as Mark mentioned, we have plans to do further work next year as part of that plan, where we are going to look at that process in depth, step by step, just to try and make sure we're understanding the control framework and help assist in addressing those weaknesses.
Yeah, I believe that's what it was, but without asking, I wouldn't be assured, would I? But thank you very much for your answer. I do appreciate it.
Any other questions? Right, Graham, can you put the recommendation?
Thank you, Chairman. The recommendation is at page 107 in the agenda pack. It's that the progress on implementation of recommendations be noted. Chairman, no member has indicated a wish to vote against or abstain. That motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Can we move on to page 113? Much to get again?
Thank you, Chair.
You're busy.
Well, this paper here is setting out the internal audit strategy and includes the internal audit plan for the year 21-22, and that's attached in Appendix A for approval. So there are no material changes to the actual strategy itself to what we have in previous years, and we continue to remain flexible in terms of the contingency number of days that we've included in there, and this is to enable the Director of Finance and Assets to work with the audit team to direct any areas of work that might be needed within the year. So through our review of the audit universe, which is on page 123 of your paper pack, and discussion with the Director of Finance and Assets, we have identified 7 auditable areas for the year 21-22, and these are set out on page 122 of your pack, which is our proposed audit plan. So that's Appendix A. So we have also listed 3 further audits that that we're noting as contingency audits or can be considered for next year should things change within the year. I was just going to pause there unless there take any questions on the plan.
Robin.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for your time. Just some clarity on one point on page 122, where I think it's the blue light hub assessment. Now, I believe, and Chairman will correct me if I'm wrong, that is working with the 2 other blue light systems, and you're doing an ongoing assessment of that. Will there be an early vision where we are with that? Because that's key in the way all the service has been delivered, with the Fire Authority now doing so many more things than it did before, in the sense of assisting in accidents and some paramedics and all sorts of wonderful things that we're doing. Will that assessment come back as a separate report at some point, just to assess how it's going, whether it's resource-led, because resources are a real strain on the authority at the moment, and some other people's resources may not. Who pays for what, really? Because it could be that we end up funding something that we didn't intend to fund as a natural consequence of being good people. I think Mark's got his camera on. I bet he's going to tell me exactly what that is now.
Well, I was just going to say, I will chair this, Robin. Mark.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So I think the purpose of this audit is quite a narrow scope in terms of looking at primarily the financials and also the objectives that are set out when we did the project, how we achieve those objectives. What we'll do is we'll use that to inform a kind of wider piece of work of lessons learned, and as you say, touch on some of the things around what have been the other benefits gained that perhaps we weren't anticipating through the closer working with other blue light colleagues, which will inform a much broader report to come back at a later date as well.
And just lastly, through you, Chairman, will that report show the fiscal implications of it? Because I'm minded to the fact that the fragility of the Fire Authority going forward, and though the Fire Authority pay its portion, we shouldn't be double costing the residents, in the sense that we shouldn't be spending more than we need to, but we should spend what's adequate. Would that be correct, Mark?
Yeah, we'll set out the full financial implications, both in terms of what we thought it would cost, what it actually cost, and projected savings. Have they been achieved? We'll cover all of those within that report.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated.
Any other questions? I believe not. Okay. Graham, can you put the recommendation?
Thank you, Chairman. The recommendation is at page 113 of the agenda pack, and it is essentially that the internal audit strategy and annual internal audit plan be approved.
Right.
There are no members indicating that they wish to vote against or abstain that motion. That the motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Can we move on to page 125? Same again.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the last paper, and in this paper we're making
thanks for your hard work.
Thank you. In this paper, we're making a recommendation that the authority adopts the SIPFA recommended assurance opinions and definitions. So recently, SIPFA released a paper that examined a case for standardising the terminology and the definitions used in audit engagements across the public sector, and subsequently standardised the set of opinions and the definitions that audit services are to use. In Appendix A, which is page 130, we have done a comparison of what we currently have at the Fire Authority, the assurance opinions, against those recommended by SIPFA. We currently use the 4 levels of assurance on our engagements, and there are only very minor differences to what's being recommended by SIPFA. The main changes to note will be we're taking away partial, will be renamed limited assurance, and where we have limited assurance, SIPFA are recommending no assurance. So in terms of the actual 4 levels of assurance, we had that anyway. It's just a changing of the label in essence and the definitions. And with this, we want to ensure that we continue to conform to the best practice principles in terms of the standard, and it helps with benchmarking in future with other local authorities by standardising our opinions. And I'll pause for any questions.
Robbie.
Thank you. The limited assurance question, you start from the premise a fundamental weakness has been identified. I think you explained the system that we're going to, but where we're going to go with that, and this is a big question, and it states that no assurance on the same thing. I need to understand what that is, but could I just make a plea from being a Norfolk lad that when these reports come through, I just make a plea for whatever reason that we do as an authority try and drop acronyms. There's none in this. These reports are much better, but I meet so many reports with acronyms in, which is, as I didn't go to acronym school, I went to Buckingham Secondary School. It would be nice if we as an authority make sure that they are plain speak, easy to understand. There's not many in this, to be fair, and to your credit, but those insurance questions I think are worthy of answer. I think you will have the answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. I'll do my best to answer with the no assurance. So I think historically we did have them, and it's always been an argument and discussion across audit sector that it's difficult to say completely no assurance because there'll always be something in place. It's just that it's inadequate. So which is why in terms of us as an authority, we had limited assurance. But in terms of what SIPFA are recommending, it's more to reiterate the urgency and the action that needs to be taken. So in given the no assurance, it's just flagging we have so many concerns, you need to drop everything and you need to address what's been highlighted in the report. So I think it's just to change the emphasis in terms of the overall opinion that's coming across. But fundamentally from a risk perspective, they are pretty much the same. There's no material changes in the definitions or in the opinions themselves, if that helps.
Thank you very much. It's just when you see the word no assurance, you can read it one way or the other, can't you? And if you don't ask the question, then you would be falling down on your duty, wouldn't you? You give the explanation. Thank you so much. It's an obvious, but it's just the wording. When I was making a joke about acronyms, sometimes plain speak for me is probably best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robin.
Well, I hope that explains it. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
That was excellent. That was excellent. Any other questions? I believe not. Graham, can you put the recommendation?
Thank you, Chairman. The recommendation is at page 125, and it's essentially that the adoption of the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy standardised assurance options and definitions be approved.
Okay.
My screen has gone blank, Chairman, but I can't see anyone indicating
there isn't. So
that motion's carried.
Thank you very much. Are you okay, Graham? You're going to get back on? I'm sure you will do.
I just can't see anything, but that's fine, Chairman.
Okay, moving on. Page 131. I believe this is Stuart. Morning, Stuart.
Good morning, Chairman, and good morning, members. So as you'll have seen from this paper, which it relates to our corporate risk management policy, that was last reviewed by members back in 2015 and approved by the Executive Committee in March of that year. There wasn't anything fundamentally wrong with that policy. However, it had become overdue for review, and we therefore undertook to review and update it before the end of this financial year, hence its presence before you today. We've endeavoured to keep the policy and the associated guidance fairly concise, so there are just a few things that I will pick out and draw to your attention before responding to any feedback or questions that members may have. Firstly, in relation to the governance arrangements for this policy, you'll have seen that the formal approval of it is reserved to the Executive Committee, but that this committee is empowered to make recommendations to the Executive. In terms of review and scrutiny prior to today, we carried out consultations with relevant stakeholders, including the authority lead member, prior to it being reviewed by our own performance management and strategic management boards in February. As you'll have seen from the first page one of the cover paper, we have taken the opportunity to look at recent good practice guidance from authoritative sources, in particular the relevant International Standards Organisation standard, and use this to strengthen and supplement what was contained in the preceding policy and guidance. We have also updated it to reflect recent changes to our own internal governance structures, which were primarily around changes to strengthen our project control environment with the introduction of a portfolio management office and widening of the remit of our business transformation board to provide a kind of a one-stop point of control for all things project related. The policy has also been aligned with the current document protocols, so there is now a short policy statement which you've seen at Annex A, followed by more detailed guidance at Annex B. Updates to changes relative to the preceding guidance are shaded grey in the document. You will also have seen that there is a specific section on authority member roles and responsibilities at section 7.1, which I think is page 142 of your packs, or page 5 of the guidance note, depending on which numbering system you're using. Finally, you'll see that we've not changed the way that we report to this committee on corporate risks themselves, which of course is the subject of the next paper, so that will continue to be in the same familiar format from the one that you've been used to. So at that point, if I may, I'll pause and just ask for any questions or feedback that members may have before you consider any recommendations you wish to make to the Executive Committee.
Thank you. Any questions? Robin?
Just to thank you, through you, Chairman, for the report. Only just to ask that post-May, I follow this report reasonably well. I'm a relatively new member because I come onto your authority this year. I think that with new members and the new council, could I just ask that there be some internal explanation to the new members coming on, because they need to understand this to be better, to be able to scrutinise what you're doing, and the chairman will know this as a long-standing member, that they need assistance to actually understand the flow. I think I understand it, and I'm grateful for it. I have got some question on the corporate risk, but that's the next bit, isn't it? So I'll wait till then.
Yeah. Stuart.
Yeah, thank you. No, I would certainly take that on board. Thank you, Councillor. I think that's something that we could include in the scope of the induction training for new members when that takes place.
Because my worry with it is that members will sit silent and then they won't be doing scrutiny, and you appreciate scrutiny because without scrutiny it doesn't allow you to have the challenge and rigor to be as professional as you all are.
No,
indeed, we all agree with that.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Graham, do you want to put the recommendation?
Thank you, Chairman. As Stuart indicated, this is going to be a recommendation up to the executive for approval. The recommendation essentially is at page 131 of the agenda pack, and it's that the corporate risk management policy set out at Annex A and guidance at Annex B be recommended to the executive committee for approval. Chairman, I've got no indications of a member wishing to vote against or abstain that recommendation, so the motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Can we move on to item 9? Stuart.
Indeed, thank you, Chairman. So this is the regular corporate risk management update that we provide to every meeting of this committee. You will have seen that there's been quite a few changes to the corporate risk register since we last updated you in November. As you'll have seen from the risk map at Appendix A of the document, we've now got 6 risks that we're monitoring at this level. And what I propose to do is I'll give you a brief overview of each in descending order relative to impact and probability. And I may also refer to colleagues in 1 or 2 cases where there's been some significant developments since the publication of this document. I'm also happy to take any thoughts or comments on each risk as we go through them rather than leaving it to the end, because it's probably easier to do that that way.
Indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. So firstly, just relating to the funding and savings risk, which, as you'll see, remains at red rag status. I'm not actually proposing to go through this one in detail, as obviously you very comprehensively explored it at the February Fire Authority meeting, where we obviously set the budget and the precept and looked ahead the medium-term financial plan. So I don't think that we've got anything particularly material to add to what was discussed at that meeting, but obviously happy to take any questions or observations that members may have in relation to that one.
Okay, questions? Robin.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, I take on board what the officer said and respect it entirely, but I do think we have to discuss a little bit about page 162, which is on the 16th of February, where we identified figure 1.1 million, which is, the risks going forward and the lack of government support. We need to just have, for information for the meeting, because it's in the agenda, how that's taking forward. The chairman will know that we received letters to the authority, an exchange of correspondence between us and the said minister, but we are not still unable to settle that question, and the shortage of funding is going to be the biggest question for the fire authority going forward. So not to touch on it would be amiss, and I just need some explanation how we're going to take that forward. I know we discussed it earlier about the possible referendum, but if we wasn't going to do a referendum, there are the terrible situation where, as was discussed endlessly by councillors representing the authority at the meeting, about the only alternatives would be loss of fire stations, or it would be resource, which is always staff, which is a terrible thing to happen, and what the government's going to do, or whether they're continuing conversations, because this is something that needs to be squared. The circle needs to be squared, because the authority has been responsible. It has done everything it could possibly do, and now we're asking for the government to help. Now, is there any conversations going on like that way, and are we using the good offices of our members of parliament to take our case forward? Because I think we have a good case. We serve a large area of Milton Keynes and Buckinghamshire. It's a large rural county, and the pressures on it are different to an urban area. I'm sure there's going to be an answer for that, but I think it's important when we're discussing these things we give some detail around the question. Thank you.
Well, Mark, could you answer that? And I can certainly say myself that the present chairman of this authority has been contacting MPs. So, Mark.
Yeah, certainly, Councillor. You're very right to highlight the opportunity to kind of move the conversation forward, highlighting the correspondence we've had to date. I think the opportunity we've got going forwards is the comprehensive spending review. So the last couple of years, we just had 1 year rollovers. This year, we're anticipating a 3-year comprehensive spending review. So we're making sure we're part of that conversation through the the National Fire Chiefs Council and the Local Government Association. We're looking to joint fund a secondee to work closely with the Home Office to work on updating last year's spending review to make the case for additional funding for the fire service, recognising, as you say, some of the unique pressures that the service is facing. Some services are much better funding than others, and we'll certainly make the case where Bucks needs additional funding. I think in terms of MPs, as the chairman says, we are speaking to MPs. The chairman is in regular conversation with them. And on the date of the funding settlement, Steve Baker spoke in the Commons and articulated our case very well about how in some instances we appear to be caught between two government departments, those being the Home Office and the Ministries of Communities and Local Government, in terms of referendum limits, and Home Office saying they support it, but perhaps getting knocked back by the MHCLG. So it's certainly something we're alive to. I see Jason's got his hand up, and I suspect Jason will be able to kind of allude further to some of those conversations and some of the campaigning we're doing on that.
Jason.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to pick up your point, Councillor Stutchbury, you're right to raise it. In terms of meetings with MPs, we have written to all the MPs to get meetings in the diary. A number have been arranged, and there's one actually this Friday. And so we're just getting them in the diary to talk about actually our financial position. And then we will obviously, after we've had them discussions, we'll then report back to the Overview and Audit Committee and to the full authority in terms of how well or not them conversations have gone. It's also worthy of note, actually, we've already also had a meeting with the Home Office, with civil servants from the Home Office, and raised the issue. We got support from the National Fire Chiefs Council about our financial position, and this was raised again with the civil service at the Home Office, and they acknowledged the issue. And subsequently, what's going to happen is that a civil servant from the Home Office is going to be working very closely with Mark to think about and to look at what the financial position is going forward, and how we can possibly shape that or change that in terms of the CSR, which is coming along next year.
Just thank you, Jason, for that reassurance of the work you're undertaking. It's to your credit. One thing I think should be flagged up to them, as we discussed earlier in the meeting, is the Blue Light Hub. And the additional value that the Fire Authority adds to that Blue Light Hub, because they're really getting good value for money. They're really getting excellent resource. They're really getting top quality staff, and the resilience of that Blue Light Hub would be failing if, for any reason, the Fire Authority had to take retrograde decisions about staffing and fire stations. So I do think we need to stress that to them, because they need to understand the whole picture that you're working in, and you're doing a good job. But I do think they need to understand the background of that, because my experience, limited as it is, with MPs, once you've got their concentration, it's a good thing. Once you've got them going in a direction, it's a good thing. But they need to understand the totality of it, because quite frankly, they have very little opportunity in Parliament to raise questions at present, and they're not meeting as they once did. So they cannot be as robust as a group of MPs as they once would have been. So it's not a political comment about them, but it's a comment about per se, because that Blue Light Hub thing, if we were apt to reduce services, that would be less effective. That would implement onto both the fire, would implement onto the police and the ambulance service. And they need to understand that. They need to understand, because you've taken on so much more, and every time you've been asked, you've done it. but they need to understand that it's not a standalone service anymore. It's a supporting service to everybody else, and they need to understand that language, because in Westminster they're in a bit of a bubble down there, and they're probably in separate bubbles now under COVID. So they do need to understand it fully. I'm sorry to go on, but it's something I feel strongly about, and I need to express my view.
Thank you, Robin. Jason, do you want to come back on that, or leave it there?
I'm happy to, Chairman. Thank you very much, and thank you for raising it, Councillor Stutchby, because you are right. I mean, the authority during the period of the pandemic, just for example, we continue to support 4 vaccination centres across Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes, and we're key in running them with health partners. We've obviously seconded staff over to South Central Ambulance Service, where staff have been on the front line with existing paramedics responding to medical emergencies on ambulances during the period of the pandemic. We've delivered PPE to nursing homes and people who are on the front line, and also delivered food parcels to people who actually can't get out. Some elderly people who are most at risk in the community couldn't get out. So we've done a range of things. Now, we've raised these with the MPs on previous occasions. This isn't a political point because I'm not a politician. What I will say is, in terms of support, we do get overwhelming support from our MPs. They do listen and they do help. But we'll continue to bang the drum to get the very best deal for Buckinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service. And thank you for your ongoing support, because it does make a huge difference. But as we go forward, we'll also reflect back through this committee and through the Fire Authority and the Executive Committee on how them issues are going, and any decisions that we need to take in the future will come to the full authority for them to be discussed.
Lastly, I hope the spending review is to our favour. Of course, we have no control over that. It's in flux, but we must hope so. And thank you, Chairman, for allowing me the liberty to ask those questions.
And thank you for your really positive comments. Great. Graham, do you want any other questions first?
I think Stuart's got some other strands of the report to present them, Chairman.
Sure.
Yes, thank you. So just moving on to the staff availability risk, you'll see that also remains at a red rag status for a variety of reasons, with both long-term, such as the potential impact of our retirement profile, and more short-term ones, such as the impact of COVID. You'll also see that we've extracted the risks associated with the impact of recent court and tribunal decisions in relation to the firefighters' pension schemes, as these are sufficient to warrant monitoring as a separate risk in their own right, as they have financial and resourcing implications, as well as potential implications for staff availability, as detailed at page 11 of Appendix C. I think it might be 170 in your document pack. So I thought we could probably, given that they are obviously interrelated, we'd perhaps just take those two together and just again invite members to ask any questions or if they have any comments or observations in relation to those particular areas of risk.
Any more observations? Okay, Robin?
Just to make an observation that I'm very grateful for the detail of the report. I'm very grateful for the information, the openness and the clarity within the report, Chairman. I think we need to say that because they asked for an observation, so somebody must respond.
Thank you for that. Okay, Stuart, I think that's it, is it?
I can see Mark Hemming has his hand raised. Just.
That's not me, Stuart. That's Councillor Hussain.
My apologies. Sorry. Apologies, Councillor.
Shall I come in?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that report. And I'm just clarifying, these COVID-19 vaccine which has been given to the people all over. And I just wonder if there was any, it was compulsory for the fire authority members to take, or is it just normal, or is anybody been reluctant to take?
As far as I know, it would be entirely voluntary. There would be no compulsion on anyone to take a vaccine. we were going to cover that slightly later on as I move on to the vaccine risk, but obviously what we've been doing there is just working with our NHS and CCG partners where there are underruns in batches of vaccines and things, so that obviously you appreciate the vaccines themselves are perishable, and of course matching is a bit of an art and a science to obviously matching up the supply and demand equation, and obviously where perhaps there's a potential for an undershoot in the distribution of a particular batch, we can use up that spare capacity rather than it being wasted. So that's the kind of thinking behind that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stuart.
Thank you.
Any more on this item?
So that very neatly does bring us on to the pandemic risk, and you will have seen that we did experience a bit of a spike in staff absence for COVID related reasons at the beginning of the year. That's now receded, and obviously we just touched on some of the measures that we've been taking to protect our workforce. In particular, obviously, as we discussed, providing access to vaccinations, but also testing as well. So we've currently got that risk at an amber rag status, as I think we, as best as we can. We think we're pretty much doing everything that is possible to control that risk and reduce the risk, obviously, to our workforce and also, of course, to the public that they interact with. So again, I'll just stop there, just in case anyone has anything else that they would like to ask about that particular side of things before moving on. Okay, I'll take that as people are content. Just moving on now to the information security risk. I'm actually going to hand over to Graham Britton on this one, as there have been some developments that have emerged since this update went to press, and so he was just a few things that he would like to draw to your attention. Graham.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. At page 6 of 11 on the landscape, in the bottom right there, you'll see that there's been a couple of cybersecurity risks that we are monitoring and are dealing with. And although information security is broader than cybersecurity, this is something that's keeping our ICT team particularly on their toes at the moment. And I think perhaps if I just give an update of where we are to expand on the little note there dated the 19th of February, I think what I have to say is probably concerning and comforting in equal measure. Just turning first to the WannaCry hack, the recent WannaCry vulnerability with Microsoft. This is to inform members that on the 9th of February, Microsoft released security patches to resolve vulnerabilities in operating systems from Windows 7 onwards, including current versions of Windows 10. This vulnerability would allow the virus ransomware WannaCry to run on our systems. This is the ransomware that caused so much disruption across the world, and in particular to the NHS in May 2017 on its Windows XP workstations. I'm pleased to report that within 48 hours, our ICT team picked up the patches, tested their efficacy on our PCs and network, and began distribution to all our devices. A further Microsoft vulnerability was brought to our attention by Microsoft on the 2nd of March, where they released urgent security patches to resolve vulnerabilities in the Microsoft Exchange server that we use. We had a server maintenance window pre-booked for the evening of the 4th of March and were able to add these patches to the work schedule. Working into the early hours of the 5th of March, the implementation by the ICT was a success, and we are now protected from this vulnerability. And another example of the sort of emerging nature and dynamic risk in the field of cybersecurity, on the 25th of February, we received notification from the National Cyber Security Centre that a work email address of one of our employees had been identified as being in the possession of Quackbot hackers. Quackbot is known as a precursor to ransomware, which could have infiltrated our system. We took this notification very seriously, not least because this is the first such notification that we have received from the National Cyber Security Centre, and the ramifications to the authority of a ransomware infection is very serious. ICT were very quick to speak to the identified user and checked with our security providers to ensure that they all offer protection to Quackbot, which they do. Further advice from the National Cyber Security Centre was Following further advice, from the National Cyber Security Centre, it was decided that the email address of the user would be deleted and replaced with a new address to ensure the threat has been removed. The ICT team and SMB will begin an information campaign to encourage users not to divulge their work email addresses unnecessarily. Thank you, members. Happy to take any questions or hand back to Stuart.
No, I think the only reason...
Robin.
Yeah, but the thing is, you can't get...
Thank you very much for that reassurance. What I would ask is, it may seem trite or trivial compared to what you've had to do. With the interaction of councillors with the authority and the further difference of their email addresses, can you assure me that the council email addresses, which are public email addresses because they're public members, couldn't in any way bring these problems back into the system? Because councillors have thousands of emails in a year from different people, and we have to be mindful of that. But when we email the authority, we could be a source of contamination. Or do they go in through a separate sort of communication, never get to the main drive or hard drive of the authorities' actions? I hope that's the case, but if not, it's something we should look at.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. I mean, you do identify that I think the biggest risk to the authority is the human factor, where members on their council email addresses may inadvertently open something that's contains some malicious software or ransomware. For the authority, we do constantly update our firewalls and make sure it's a continual investment to maintain that security. But the risk is so dynamic that sometimes the cyber hackers are sort of one step ahead and looking to exploit the innocent user who might open an email address. I mean, the work email addresses are, even if they're not published, they are easily predictable in terms of the format of a work email address. So what the step we're taking is just to ensure that staff do not use them for personal use, where the vulnerability could be exploited greater than it could be in a work context.
The question which reassurance I seek on, because councils are public, and if there's a disjunction there, we will be communicating quite rightly, chairs of committees and that, with officers, and members may ask questions. But with that brings an additional challenge to you. I'm presuming that the Buckinghamshire Council's systems will cut out most of that anyway, because they seem to have these alerts that come up now and again. But can we seek reassurance that there's some synergies between Milton Keynes Council, Buckinghamshire Council, that after all the work you've done, we don't then find an outside person brings it all back to the beginning again, by emailing a officer, and maybe some protocols might need to be put in place around that. I don't understand what they are, but it could need to be looked at. I don't want to close public discussion down, and I don't want to close anything down, but what I don't want to do is open you up to unwarranted pressure and attack, because these things are very complicated, and talking about them's easy, understanding them is far more difficult.
I mean, all I can offer, Chairman, is that I would ask our head of ICT to liaise with his counterparts at Milton Keynes Council and Buckinghamshire Council to see what they have in place, because we're not cited on the security and firewalls of Buckinghamshire Council and Milton Keynes Council.
Yeah, that's a good idea, and you'll report back. Thank you very much.
Thank you for reassurance. It's just if you don't ask, that's what
absolutely.
for.
Stuart.
Thank you, Chairman. So just one more risk to talk about. That's the risks associated with the move out of the transitional arrangements with the EU, with the UK's departure. You'll see we've actually reduced the RAG status to green on that one. We have not, and we do not expect to experience any material disruption to our operations as a result of this. Obviously, there is an agreement in place now which mitigated some of the risks that we might have faced. We are continuing to monitor developments, of course, and engage, particularly through the Thames Valley Local Resilience Forum. They have a COVID cell, which I'm a part of, but it might well be that come the summer, this risk can potentially drop off the corporate risk register altogether. So that concludes the review of the risks that we monitor at this level. And just obviously, just finally, if anybody's got any last questions or comments before I move on.
Any other questions? There isn't any. Graham?
Thank you, Chairman. The recommendations can be taken on block, and they're at page 153 of the agenda pack. As follows: it is recommended that the status report on identified corporate risks at Annex C be reviewed and approved. And 2, comments be provided to officers for consideration and attention in future updates and reports. And we've received plenty of positive and constructive feedback on those points, Chairman. So I don't see anyone wishing to vote against or abstain, so those recommendations are carried.
Thank you. Stuart?
Thank you, Chairman.
You're a busy person.
Yeah, indeed. So I'm going to be really brief with this one. Obviously, this is the 2019-2020 Statement of Assurance. It's a pro forma document that the Home Office requires us to produce each year in accordance with the National Framework Requirements for Fire and Rescue Services. In terms of its format, we closely follow the government guidance that you've seen is set out at Annex B. In many ways, this functions as the culmination and in sort of summary of all the various governance and assurance reports and documents that come through this committee during the course of the year, and it's very much the last link in the chain, and so obviously we can't finalise it until everything else has been reviewed and approved. Hence, it tends to come. We do try to get it to you in November, but sometimes it does unfortunately come to the March meeting. So clearly, what you're looking at in that document is really an account of things, obviously, that took place over a year ago now. So it may seem like a bit like ancient history, obviously, with everything that's happened since. Just in terms of the document and navigation around that, updates relative to the previous year are shaded in grey in the document. There should not be any surprises in it. As I've said, it really just summarises things that you've seen and approved in previous meetings. Probably the most noteworthy new thing in it is that we've obviously included a new section at page 10, which might be 185 in your pack, which just summarises the outcome of the HMIC FRS inspection. So that was really all I was going to do by way of an introduction to that one, and I'll just open up for any questions or observations that members may have. So, Councillor Stutchbury, yes.
Just to say that I thank you for the explanation. It's self-explanatory. It is stuff that we theoretically and actually looked at, and I'm content with the work that's been taking place.
Thank you, Councillor.
Chairman, there don't appear to be any other questions for the officer. Chairman, do you wish me to put the recommendation?
I think we might have lost the chairman.
Right. Would Councillor Mannon like to preside?
I think you better carry on as you wish to get that agreement, please.
Okay, thank you. That's the Vice Chairman of the committee, so I'll with her approval, I'll put the recommendation. The recommendation...
sorry, you didn't hear me. I haven't... sorry about that.
Sorry, Dave.
Carry on, Graham.
I'm just putting the recommendation, Chairman. That's at page 172 of the agenda pack. Let me get it up. It's that the 2019-20 Statement of Assurance be approved for signature by the Chairman of the Overview and Audit Committee and the Chief Fire Officer. Chairman, I don't see anyone wishing to indicating a wish to vote against or abstain, so that motion is carried.
Thank you very much, and sorry about the blip, but we're back on. Thank you very much. Can we move on? Item 11, Marcus.
Good morning, members. I'll be taking you through the Treasury Management Performance Report for 21-22 Q3. So this covers the period April to December. The accrued interest earned during this period was 94,000, which is 18.5k lower than the budget set for the same period. This is a direct impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the low interest rates will certainly continue for the remainder of this financial year. Therefore, we are currently projecting to forecast in the region of 100,000 interest for the full financial year 2021. In terms of investments, we will be continue to monitor the cash flow position on a daily basis and to ensure that we meet our short-term expenditure requirements and maintain adequate liquidity. To support this, the investments we currently have in place, a number of counterparties have frequent maturity dates. Looking ahead to next financial year, we still anticipate the low interest rates will continue. Therefore, as part of the budget setting for 21-22, which was approved at the Fire Authority in February, the budget has reduced from 150k to 30k. I won't say any more on this report. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Robin.
Only to say through you, Chairman, that the report reflects the financial situation in the country, and it's the same situation that everybody's experiencing, and there's no notable light at the end of the tunnel on interest rates and resources, and the report reflects what is a commonality in most financial reports that we see in other authorities and other places, and I respect the work that's gone into it through you, Chairman, and we look for the sunny uplands whenever they arrive.
Thank you much for that. Any other questions? Graham.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll put the recommendation, which is at page 197 of the agenda pack, and that is that the Treasury Management Performance 2020/21 report be noted. Chairman, I don't see anyone wishing to vote against or abstain. That motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Can we move on to next item, item 12? I believe Mick and Jason want to contribute to this. Mick. And I believe we've got Craig.
That's correct. Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, members. Just really briefly, before I do hand over to Craig with all of the detail, I just wanted to firstly give you an apology. The eagle-eyed of you may have spotted the error on the date on the cover paper being 2020. It's my mistake entirely, and I do often get accused of living in the past. So apologies for that. I do apologise. As I say, this is our annual performance monitoring report, and Craig will take you through the finer details. But I just did want to say that this is a timely reminder to give members assurance that despite the significant challenges that's been presented to us by COVID and our response to the pandemic, that our business as usual critical activities do continue to be a priority and remain our primary focus. I appreciate this reporting period precedes much of the pandemic. However, I can assure you that we continue to monitor our performance in all of these, serious critical areas. So, not wishing to steal any of Craig's thunder, I will hand over to Craig, but pleasingly you can see from the executive summary that there has been some significant improvements across many of our key indicators, and in particular some of the most dangerous types of fires where injuries can occur. So without further ado, over to you, Craig.
Great.
Thank you, Mick. Thank you, Chairman. So I just wanted to start off with really just commenting for those that have seen our annual reports before. In the past, they've been considerably different to this one. This is more of a light touch on our outcomes of our instance, so less about what our enablers, but more what the outcome, like I say, of the instance were. That being said, we've also changed the layout. So in the past, we might have talked about prevention and protection. Members of the public might not have understood that as much, but what our vision is to be the safest areas in which to live, work and travel. So the report focuses on that. So in the home, in the workplace, in travel, and there's also an additional area called community. The way we've presented our data is slightly different as well. So again, in the past, we looked at recent trends. In here, we still do that, but we've tried to be as transparent as possible, and we've included a 5-year previous average on that as well. At that point, I can take any questions, but I can see there is one.
Robin?
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, thank you for the report. On pages 227 and the previous page 226, there is some commonalities but some concerns, because the deliberate primary fires seem to be reducing, yet with what they call deliberate secondary fires seems to be very, very high. I'm not sure what that means. Well, is that for fires starting after a fire's been put out? People are coming along and relighting it, because it says deliberately secondary fires. I'm not sure what that means. Is that doesn't refer to arson? It refers to some other consequences that starts the fire again. Is that
okay? I'll explain it a little bit. That's fine. There is a glossary at the back that will explain that. However, just to go through it, so we class deliberate fires in this report as any fire that has been set to somebody's property or something that wasn't their own. So you could argue at some points that is arson. The difference between primary and secondary, that is a fire term. So primary is generally something that is insurable. So it'll be your home, your car, anything that has some value. Secondary tends to be where it's something that's derelict or waste or rubbish or something that you wouldn't go to your insurance and try and claim against. So it could be just a great example would be the Blue Lagoon. If it's a hot summer, there will be lots of rubbish left, and before the council get a chance to clear that, somebody has used that opportunity to set fire to rubbish. So again, not something that somebody would claim from the insurance, but still a fire nonetheless, and we would get called to a fire. And it can spread. So if a fire spread from a secondary to a primary, the primary would take precedent in that.
Right, thank you for that. I mean, that explains it well to me, but what it does show is the risk of people, a secondary fire starting, the risk that you've identified, and it just seems to be on, though it's dipped down from 418 to 390, it just seems to be on an upward spiral. It just seems to be something which is rising, which is a time limiting factor to the authority having to deal with it. And it's also, as you rightly pointed out, thankfully, a permanent risk to the community periodly. Now, I don't know how we address that, whether that's back to enforcement or to secondary authorities like the police or whatever, but it is a concern that it's on the rise, where the other graph shows a definite dip down. It's heading the better direction. The dip down on the other one isn't that significant between 418 and 390. It's still quite high. It means that it's something which is a continuous function of pressure on the authority.
Yes, and it is one of our key focuses, definitely on deliberate secondary fires. We have a prevention team that are focused on this and collaborating with the councils. So, again, mentioning the Blue Lagoon, that is one of our key areas where we focus. There are a few key spots. It's not in this report. We do run other reports, and we identify where those are, and we try and put some prevention activities in place, whether it be just more pickups gaps with regards to litter bins, public litter bins and things like that. But our prevention team are working on that. One thing I would like to, it's probably prudent to mention now that this is a light report. What we're going to be doing in the very near future is working with members to understand what you want to see in this report. So it might be that you want to understand what those initiatives are, and we'll start including that sort of information in there so that preempting these type of questions so that they can be answered. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's the terminology around these things, isn't it? And
yeah,
and you're an officer and I'm a councillor.
That's fine.
And I understand how these things can sometimes be different. But I do thank you very much, Craig.
Thank you very much, Robin.
Professional way of giving it. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, Craig. Any more?
I would say there is a glossary at the back that we've tried to identify those terms that that can cause confusion. I mean, I can run through a few points, or I'm happy to take questions. All of it is whatever you'd prefer, really, Chairman. There's a couple of bits that, in fact, I would just pick up on. So. On the 5-year average on the attendance times, some of it looks like we've slowed down over a 10-year period. However, I would just point out that that is mainly that comes from a 2-year period, so 2011-12, 2012-13, where we had exceptional attendance times, way below anything we've had before. So that's impacted the 5-year average scores. Just to add a bit more reassurance, well, that's not in this report, but I just thought I'd bring it along, is if you compare 2010-11 to 2019-20, our attendance times to all primary fires, those are the important fires that Mick mentioned, so they're the ones that will have value or have injuries or fatalities at. Our attendance times have only increased by 1.8% across those 9-year time. The whole of England has increased by 6%, and significantly rural services such as ours have increased by 9.5%. So we actually fare quite well in that. It just, the report doesn't reflect that so much, but we're right to be challenged on it. The only other thing I thought might raise a few questions is in the home section there is a section called deliberate fires to somebody else's dwelling. Now there's not many of these. I just wanted to explain, and again maybe the feedback, we should put that in the report going forward. I didn't want people worrying that there was somebody going around setting fire to people's houses. Most of these are where there's either a building that was unoccupied at the time and somebody was living there and a fire occurred, so whether it be there was no heating and they had a fire inside, or a fire started from a secondary fire that was deliberate to somebody else's. So whether it be rubbish and it's spread to a home. And most of the times that is just normally the bricks on the outside. But that covers most of those, so I didn't want anyone panicking on those. There has been a large increase in our special services. So special services is basically anything we do that isn't fire related in the homes. So that's generally supporting the increases down to supporting SCAS, gaining entry to patients. And then the rest is all very positive. So a number of accidents running fires, again, those ones we try to reduce the most due to because of injuries and fatalities. They are reducing the number of primary fires in non-domestic buildings. They are reducing, so that's that's all good. There was one serious injury in the workplace, fire-related, in 2019-20. That was actually in a prison. That was a prison cell, and it was not a member of the workforce, and that was just smoke inhalation, and that was it. And RTCs continue to rise in the number we attend. However, that being said, the number of fatalities and serious injuries have remained constant. That is really it, unless there are any questions.
Any other questions? It appears not. Graham, can you put the recommendation?
Thank you, Chairman. The recommendation is on page 205 in your agenda pack, and it is that the outturn performance against the outcome measures specified in the corporate plan 2015 to 2020 be noted. Chairman, I can see no member wishing to vote against or abstain. That motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Item 13. I believe this is Dave Norris.
Morning, members.
Morning, Dave.
Morning, Chairman.
Right, can you carry on?
Of course. Thank you very much. And good morning, everybody. So I'm now going to take you through an update on HMIC FRS, Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services. I'll break this update down into three sections. The first section will talk about the COVID-19 report, which was released in January this year. We'll then come on to preparations for round 2 inspections, which are shortly to start in earnest for us, and we've done some preliminary work on that, which I'll talk through, and then I'll cover the improvement plan, which you'll see as part of today's annex. So if you could cast your mind back to August 2020, the Home Secretary commissioned HMIC FRS, Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services, to inspect how fire and rescue services in England were responding to the pandemic. This service was visited in November, and the report was released in January this year, and you'll see the report in the annexes. I'm pleased to be able to report to the board that overall HMI were very positive in their comments on how our service has prepared and continued to deliver a service to the public of Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes during the pandemic, and certainly the activity that we've engaged with wider partners. So we have continued our prevention and protection activity, albeit in a modified form, but continue to support those at highest risks from fire and other emergencies. We've supported a range of partners, including the Local Resilience Forum, local authorities, and at local level or community level, much of the voluntary and partnership response and how that has supported the public more widely. Availability of resources has remained strong. In fact, in some areas, it's actually improved over the recent period, and perhaps that was to be expected. And at the same time, central to the report, in my view, has been a very positive commentary on how well we've looked after our staff in terms of welfare arrangements, broader support, and ensuring that their safety and welfare is at the forefront of our thinking. And we certainly continue that as we go through the next phase of the pandemic. We've taken a firm grip of those areas of activity that we decided to pause during the pandemic, and we're now in early discussions around how we start to bring elements of our activity which had been paused during the various stages of the pandemic, and how we start to bring that back online. You'll note in the COVID report at section 9, a challenge laid forward by HMIC FRS is how the service continues to work with partners more broadly and to continue the innovative working that's been introduced over the recent period. And we've already had some early discussions about how we continue that approach and how we manage bringing the organisation back online in a way which is very mindful of the long and enduring impacts of the COVID pandemic on our staff, on our partners, and on our communities. And that's something that will remain a focus for us over the next period. So that's the COVID-19 report. I'll now move on to round 2 inspections. So earlier in the year, we were made aware that the round 2 inspections would continue in earnest. We are in tranche 1, and we have now been informed that our inspection will commence on the 24th of May. The inspection activity will last for around 6 weeks. You may remember previously there was around a week or so of what was called discovery activity, and that was where inspection teams would join us in service and they would work with various teams to understand how they carried out their important work. And then later we were visited by inspectors to carry out field work, and that's where very much they looked at how well we were delivering our activity to the public and how prepared we were in service to continue that work. So they've had to reformat the way in which they carry out inspection activity. We understand that much of that activity will be carried out remotely, hence it being over probably a 6-week period, although that's still to be confirmed. But it will include still discovery work where we're able to share the work that we're doing with inspectors, and there will be interviews of senior team leaders towards the end of the period. We're already preparing our documents for submission, so part of the inspection programme includes a document review where we submit a range of documents to HMI for them to consider. And we're also preparing a self-assessment. Now, this is a relatively short piece of work. It's only 1,500 words, and we've been asked 4 broad questions predominantly around what we've done since the last inspection and how we've addressed some of the matters that HMI and the inspectors raised, how we've managed during the COVID period, and what we're going to be doing as we come out of the current phase of the pandemic and we start to move into the next phase. That's something that we currently have in draft, and we are looking to submit to inspectors again towards the end of January. So as I report to you today, I'm satisfied with the level of progress that's been made towards the next inspection. I think we're in a good position as we go into the next inspection to talk very much about how we've responded to the pandemic, how we've worked much more broadly in partnership, how we focused very much on our core business. We've kept good control over the activity that we've chosen to pause, activity we've chosen to stop, a new activity, of course, that we've chosen to introduce, and we will continue to monitor that, but very much how we're starting to set ourselves for as we move into the next phase of the pandemic. So part 3 of the report is then going into the annex you'll see on the improvement plan, and you may remember that this improvement plan was put together in response to the areas for improvement and the cause for concern which we received in our last report. I'm satisfied that progress against that inspection plan continues to be strong, and we are incorporating that learning in our preparation for the next inspection. So that's something that's going to be the focus of our work now for the next couple of months. The team and I will be working with colleagues from across the organisation to ensure that we are, as far as possible, inspection ready, and that very much the results of the inspection and the report which we expect later on in the year will continue to inform not only our improvement journey, but how well we adapt and change our approach as necessary through the next period of the pandemic. So I'll pause there and very happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Robin?
Well, firstly, I make an observation. The letter was very pleasing, and you know, on the COVID report, and it does highlight on page 245 the stunning work of the authority on the Blue Light Hub with the police and central ambulance service, which brings us back to my comments earlier. We're doing everything we can do. Let's hope government does everything they can do to support us financially. But this just shows that what you've done has been in line with what was expected. It shows that you've done it without going into too great detail. But those two things stuck out to me, and the comments about I'm grateful for the positive, constructive way the service is engaged, and that was on 4 of the report, which says it all really. Says that you've positively engaged, and what more could we expect from you on that? And thank you very much for the time and the effort you put in. And the question would be,
I'll say, what was the question? We're all waiting for the question.
You always know there's a book with me. This question of how we go with resilience going forward isn't going to be straightforward. My understanding of this way this is going to move through the population is the NHS personally have done the vaccinations, but after that, we know the future's unclear because nobody's said whether we'll be into boosters for the evermore or what the situation will be maybe 22, 23, because the pandemic will still be here, the virus will still be in the community, and the difficulties and the risk will remain, but they may be at a lower level. But I don't know how we manage that within the authority. And you've said about opening up and being more engaging. I'm sure you're going to be mindful to those uncertainties and those risks throughout.
Jay.
Thanks, Chairman. I think there's some good observations, Councillor. What I would say is, and you've alluded to it as it was recorded by inspectors anyway, we forged some very strong relationships with local authority partners and also partnerships in health. And I think it's fair to say that they've been developing in ways that we probably wouldn't have expected at the start of the pandemic. You'll remember being briefed previously on our support to vaccination centres. And what that's shown colleagues across health is really the range of competencies that we have in service, which we need to think about how we share more widely with health partners. And that's been tremendously successful at local level. So I think as we continue to work with health partners over the next period and very much start to learn about how they propose to respond to the pandemic, we are well placed to support that activity. And I think whatever the final decisions are, and they will be based on a range of issues, of course, not least any modelling around the next phase of the pandemic, but also the success and otherwise of the vaccination programme and that wider activity, I think we are well placed to continue to support that work. And what we've demonstrated over the recent period is that we have the agility and the flexibility to respond to any of those requests that come in. So I'm confident that we're in a good place to respond as requested for the next period of the pandemic.
Thank you very much. Of course, we hope that everything's successful, but you always got a plan for the worst and hope for the best, haven't you? You know, that's how life is, really.
Jason.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to reiterate and underline what Dave has just said, just so members are aware, we attend the strategic coordinating group of the local resilience forum every single week. We're part of the tactical coordination group of the local resilience forum. We are instrumental, and we attend all the meetings with Buckinghamshire Council in relation to COVID and the COVID response with the chief executives, and we also do the same in Milton Keynes every week as well. So we are engaged and involved at the strategic level in each of the areas that we cover, and obviously we get to hear about what the next steps are, and we will be playing a major part in that as we move forward.
That's very positive. Over to you, Dave, to summarise and conclude.
Thank you, Chairman. So I think that was pretty much the three areas of the report I wanted to cover today. So that was our COVID-19 letter received earlier this year, preparations for our round 2 inspections due to commence on the 24th of May this year, and just covering progress against the outstanding areas for improvement recommendations following the cause for concern. And if members are content, I think the recommendation was for that to be noted.
Okay, that's noted.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Can we move on to...
Chairman, shall I just formally move that recommendation?
If you can, please.
Yeah, certainly. It's at page 232 of the agenda pack, and it's that the current position regarding Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services inspection programme and preparations for Buckinghamshire Fire and Rescue Services round 2 inspection be noted. Chairman, I can see no dissenting indications. That motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Item 14, I can already see Callum on the screen. So Callum.
Good morning, Chairman and Councillors. I'm going to introduce Group Commander Sean Cunningham, who is going to take us through the paper.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Good morning, councillors and members. The purpose of this report is to provide yourselves with an update on the progress that continues to be made with regard to the delivery of the Operational Insurance Improvement Plan, which is Appendix A, which I believe is page 82 of your pack. In 2016, the service invited Operational Assurance Limited to carry out an audit of our operational activities. A further 3 audits were carried out, with the last one being 2019. The contract has now concluded. However, we have and continue to make good progress against the identified recommendations. Furthermore, our own internal operational functions are now more robustly monitored, with recommendations as actions captured on our Operational Assurance Improvement Plan. The Operational Assurance Plan is a dynamic document. It's used to enhance our ability to capture, scrutinise and respond to operational learning originating from events such as our own operational debriefs and our learning review of commands, which are now customary for all notable incidents. Also assurance visits and external reviews, such as most recent, the Grenfell inquiry. To further enhance, we share and access the joint organisational learning portal, and that's via our multi-agency partners through the Joint Emergency Services Interoperability Principles. And also via the National Fire Chiefs Council, NFCC, we access and share learning events through the National Operational Learning Framework. To further enhance our operational command monitoring process, which feeds onto our OAIP, officers are trialling an electronic system called Effective Command. The system aligns the observations of the monitoring officer with skills for justice incident command criteria. The system allows data to be inputted. A scored report is then produced, which allows the operational assurance team to analyse the data for themes and trends. Budgeting needs for trialling and any subsequent purchase of an electronic monitoring system is contained within existing budget plans. Finally, the OAIP is reviewed quarterly by the Operational Assurance Group, and we will continue to update the Overview and Audit Committee on our progress against the plan. That concludes my update. Thank you for your time, and I'll be happy to take any questions if there are any.
Indeed. Questions? Robin?
Well, firstly, thank you very much for the report. On the page item 14, and it's got at the back of the report, it's got the works continue to bring methodology of information templates between Thames Valley, Oxfordshire, Buckinghamshire, develop methodology. I presume that's communications and electronics between people, and consulting still carries on. And so what that actually means, does that mean you're still having snagging points in understanding between all the people in the Thames Valley, or is that of concern? Is it not of concern? And if it is of concern, what strident steps are we taking to bring that into alignment? Because good communications can save time, save lives and save money.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor, and it's a really good observation. I don't think it's not so much a statement around any difficulty around operational alignment with our Thames Valley partners. We do align and we do share information, but at present, the actual Operation Assurance Improvement Plan, it's our improvement plan. We don't have a Thames Valley one complete. However, there are recommendations through National Operational Learning and through the joint organisational learning that can fit in. We just don't have an Operation Assurance Plan that is purely for the Thames Valley Fire Service.
I only just say, I was involved in, turned up to, in my own community where we had carbon monoxide. There's obviously great alignment in the way the fire service reacts by the amount of different engines and different place fire officers attending from probably 3 authorities to it. But I really want to know, Thames Valley is a very large valley and actually got 2 rivers in it, one being the Thames and one being the Ouse. It's always called Thames Valley, but I live against the Ouse, not the Thames. But I just need to make sure that what that actually means, because if there isn't methodology and alignment in it, communications break down, people go to the wrong places, or they miss messages. So it is important that they are in aligned, that there's a singularity of point of communication, though identifying that people have their own place within that. That's an ongoing work, it appears, but it needs to be moved forward, because though we individually act quickly, sometimes the cross-border things, being Buckinghamshire crosses borders so many places, has to be really smooth and clear. And the Thames Valley, being the police, we'd think they would have an overall communication amongst themselves, period. So it would appear that we ought to at least match that in the fire service going forward. Obviously the Health Trust and everyone will as well.
Yeah, thanks for that. Callum, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And just to assure Councillor Stutchberry that we do have an operational, apologies for repeating myself, alignment group, the Ops alignment group that sits within the Thames Valley. So that is, we've got my colleague Simon Tuffley, who's going to be presenting on Grenfell shortly. He chairs that group. So to give you the assurance, we do have, in terms of the operational deployment across all 3 services, an active and an effective working group that's looking at areas for improvement and ways in which we can work more cohesively. We already do, but look at opportunities to improve that where and when we can around operational deployment, communication, training, policy and procedure. And also, because we've got a Thames Valley Fire Control, we do have very, very effective operational communications at incidents across the whole of the Thames Valley as we stand and speak at the moment.
Thank you very much for that reassurance. I'm very pleased. Thank you.
Sean, any more observations or anything else?
No, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you much. Another question, I believe. Rex.
Hello, I represent Milton Keynes. There are currently 7 new buildings under construction that are over 10 stories high. So looking forward, is the authority looking to increase the capacity of vehicles suitable to look after the buildings in central Milton Keynes?
Chairman, I'll take that question if that's okay.
Yeah.
And just in response to that, and the next item is around the Grenfell outcomes in relation to the infrastructure. And if it's okay with the councillor, we'll let Simon give that presentation there. And if there is still a question, then we'll happily take it at that point, if that's okay.
Absolutely right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rex. Any other questions? Okay, Graham, can you put the recommendation?
Thank you, Chairman. The recommendation is at page 256, and it's that the progress made against each improvement recommendation detailed within the updated Operational Assurance Improvement Plan is noted. Chairman, no member has indicated a wish to vote against or abstain. That motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Item 15, Simon. Good afternoon, Simon, or good morning.
Thank you. Chairman, members, thank you for your time today. I'm Group Commander Tuffley, and I'm responsible for the service's technical department. And part of that role is as the project manager for implementing the response elements of the Grenfell Tower inquiry recommendations. This report seeks to update the committee regarding our progress to date in response to the Grenfell Tower tragedy on the 14th of June 2017, and in response to the recommendations made in the Grenfell Tower Inquiry Phase 1 report published on the 30th of October 2019. The report describes how our initial improvement activities commenced immediately after the tragedy and did not wait for the recommendations to be published. However, we have always remained cognizant of the need for a coordinated approach, much of which relies on legislative and national policy change. The tragedy has rightly served to refocus our minds and take a fresh look at our interactions with and our planning to respond to fires in high-rise buildings, and we've strived to move to a better state of preparedness as a result of this tragedy. We've made significant progress in implementing national operational guidance across the service and within the Thames Valley, and we are proactive in regard to our approach to collecting, assessing, sharing site-specific risk information. The authority should be proud that its fleet is well equipped, and we continue to invest in equipment to assist in dealing with these risks. Our weight of attack is also proportionate and ensures that the right number of firefighters and equipment are dispatched to fires in high-rise buildings. The report also describes the prevention challenges, where it is often the case that people who are vulnerable to the risk of fire also reside in many of our high-rise buildings. And the report also summarises the engagement initiatives and interventions undertaken to make these residents safer. The report also highlights how our protection teams are well aware of the challenges and risks associated with methods of modern building construction, and how they've taken a targeted approach to ensuring the highest risk premises remain safe. The protection teams have also been proactive in liaising with the other local authority departments responsible for enforcing areas of the building where we are not necessarily the enforcing agency. In terms of assurance, we've been proactive in ensuring our improvements work. This has been conducted recently at a local level as part of our station improvement programme, but also, as with the previous paper, more formally with an independent external scrutiny from a third-party assurance team. Further to this, we look forward to a large-scale high-rise exercise at the Fire Service College, which is currently being planned for the spring. In terms of the recommendations from the Phase 1 report, 15 are complete, 18 are in progress, and we are prepared for the impacts of the remaining 13 when they come into fruition. Looking forward, we've received some central support grant funding, which you will be aware from a recent building risk review paper to the Executive Committee, which is being used to bolster protection capacity and capability. Specific funding has also been allocated to support investment in technology that assists in implementing the inquiry recommendations. So I hope that the report serves as a useful update and provides this committee with the assurances that we're making progress against the recommendations. Thanks for your time. I'll happily take any questions But please be aware that I'm not a protection or prevention specialist, so I may have to defer any technical questions you have to the next building risk review update. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any questions? Anna?
Hello. Yes, thank you. I think it's a very good report. So I've got an observation and a question. The observation is that I'm very pleased with all the progress that has happened working together between the fire service and the different local authorities. And I'm very cognizant of the way you did that in Milton Keynes, and where there were at-risk buildings identified, there was very good proactive action afterwards. I'm particularly talking about Mellish Court and the Gables, and where there was also good communication with the residents, and it seems to be very good. But I did, reading the report, it said somewhere that generally there is very poor response to when we have consultations and try to involve the particularly hard to reach communities which often live in these buildings. Is there anything further you think that can be done to reach these?
Thank you, Councillor. That's a really good point. And this is obviously the prevention angle, which is managed through a separate team to myself. So it's not an area where I'm a particularly specialist, but I can say that Jo and her team have been particularly proactive in making sure the stations and the community safety teams are trying to engage with those at-risk people who are particularly hard to reach. In terms of further updates and what they can do more, I could perhaps bring that further into another report and add more detail as we update this committee in due course. But I know they've been very proactive in this area.
Yeah, thank you. I think Dave Norris wants to come in to help answer that. David.
Thanks very much, Chairman, and thank you for the question, Councillor. You're quite right. It does seem to be that in many of our high-rise properties there are a number of residents who may be at high risk or vulnerable from a range of different areas. It is something which our prevention team, and Simon's mentioned quite rightly Jo Cook, who's our prevention lead, they work very closely, and Jo and her team work very closely with local authorities, with landlords, with residents groups themselves, and with a range of partners to try to understand how that risk and vulnerability impacts on residents, and how through our prevention work we can address that as closely as possible. And of course, all of our activity is geared through our three components of prevention, protection and response. So prevention, of course, works most closely with residents themselves. Our protection teams, as Simon's mentioned, tries to look after the built environment and ensure that responsibilities are properly addressed. And then, should it be required, we have our response capability, which looks to support those other two functions. So I think that really summarises the three components together. But as Simon's mentioned, prevention is certainly something that we're very focused on, and I believe that we are well embedded with our local authority partners.
Thank you very much, and I'm really reassured by your answer. Thank you.
Robin, then Rex. Thanks for the question.
Well, firstly, thank you for the report. We must not stand back on this, in the sense that if anything has showed us with the Glenford Tower inquiry is these things are pernable, long and difficult. The response to it has been slow from the statutory authorities in London, and we can't sort of somehow signal the inquiry has been a perfect circle, because it hasn't. There's many people who are affected by this within the area of Glenford who are still waiting assistance. So in that background, we have to be very careful going forward, because this report in itself, what it says on the first surface could read as fine, but there are some risks here which aren't noted. The government has bringing it a planning white paper. The government's white paper will probably predict the way growth grows and the type of growth that happens in all parts of the country. Planning authorities will have less say in that. The other thing is to make sure that the planning authorities do have a say, because in the types of buildings that are constructed going forward could increase risk. The high level rush to make decisions in planning and such like has been a theme in recent years. We went from a massive documents on planning enforcement to a narrow piece of paper or a narrow file. So I think the rigour needs to be there. This fire in itself, I believe, was caused through actions within an authority unaligned with good practice, because no one would have took those decisions to do something if they were in the full knowledge that it would do harm. Now, we've got buildings in Buckinghamshire which fortunately are not as high as the Glenford Tower, although I did note when I read something the other day from Milton Keynes, they've actually, one of their tall buildings, I believe, has now been officially condemned by the local authority. We need to make sure that we are a constant theme in any buildings being going forward and the types of building which are being erected, because we don't know. Planning law is being so liberalised now that with PIP applications and such going forward, that we may have not the rigour and control over what's constructed. So I think the Fire Authority probably needs to take up some powers to have some influence in it, because you're the honest broker in this, and your primary interest is safety. And there are buildings where there's been no assistance necessarily to the up and down the country to remove cladding from buildings, so that risk still remains, and many authorities carry a financial burden which they're unable to meet. And we have to recognise that many of these buildings, which may be constructed or are constructed, are privately owned. So that's another level of complication. But the work of the report and what we're doing is fine, but I think this is going to be a constant theme going forward. And when the final report and the final findings of the inquiry are done, let's not be silent about that. Let's define it and use it as a turning point to improve safety. But I do believe that fire authorities, who are the political neutral person in all this, their job is plainly to protect, should have a greater say. And I hope that's going to happen in the future. If it doesn't, it would be a miss, and it would be a mistake, and it would replicate some of the many mistakes which so evidently brought us to the situation where we're even reading about the Glenford Tower inquiry.
Thanks for that. Callum, you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just to assure the Councillor Stutchbury and the Chairman, we have taken a twin-track approach to how we're reporting to the authority around the outcomes of the Grenfell inquiry and the changes to the building and the fire safety bills. So Group Commander Phil Mould is leading on the building risk review, so that's around the legislative changes and our active and continual involvement in the consultations around that. Since that meeting that we presented that update to the authority last month, we have subsequently written to MPs, heads of planning and the likes, seeking to become statutory consultees on high-risk residential buildings and the likes, and we'll continue to report on that work through the building risk review updates that Group Commander Phil Mould will be presenting. So that's just to give you the view that around the particular legislative changes, we have separated that out from what Simon has presented today, Group Commander Tuffley, which is focused, this paper is focused on around the infrastructure elements, so the policy, procedure, equipment and the response elements. And both of these papers, we will continue to appraise O&A and the authority on our progress around both elements of how we are dealing with one of the many outcomes of the Grenfell Tower tragedy.
Thank you, Callum, but I still remain really concerned that the planning in this country is moving at pace. The legislation is drifting forward. The local authorities will not have the influence it would perceive unless it changes through the white paper, through Parliament, through the House of Lords. Will not have the influence they once had. This is almost, could be suggested, a perfect storm, because regulatory enforcement through planning guidance is to protect everybody, and I'm really enthused that you are involved in it, and I hope that your efforts in this are taken up sincerely, because we cannot afford these things in a social, economic and moral thing going forward, and it always comes out that people proportion blame. But the evidence of the report, I hope, is open when it's published and gives full accountability to those areas, because it's about planning guidance, it's about good practice, it's about appropriate buildings. And this is where it's key, and that's why I'm grateful, Callum, that you are pursuing this, and I'm grateful, Callum, that you're going to be hoping to be a more, and I look forward in a future planning committee, hopefully to seeing you attend one day and point reasons to object to a building. And I'd like to read your report at a future planning meeting one day, and I hope that happens. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Very good points. Rex?
The planning application hasn't yet, but is eagerly anticipated in Central Milton Keynes for a building that will be 23 stories high. I would like to be assured that the authority has been involved so far, and will certainly be involved in the fire safety aspects of that planning application. And the previous question said, with all these new taller buildings coming in Central Milton Keynes, in what way is the authority anticipating increasing its capacity to deal with incidents that may occur?
Callum?
Thank you. So there's two parts to the question. In relation to the consultation, we are statutory consultees under building control. And I'm not sure of which particular building you may be referring to, because you mentioned there were others. But we have been, and we do remain, active consultees when it comes to building control matters. In relation to the impact any new building may have on us, we do visit sites as part of their development to assess what impact that may have on our response in mobilising, and throughout the whole of the build, and revisit them, both from a legislative requirement under the protection matters and also in terms of an operational response. And based upon the findings and the assessment of those crews, we call those site-specific risk assessments, we will then review what it is we need to do in terms of mobilisation for an alarm or an incident that is reasonably foreseeable at that site, from the point it's being built all the way through to the point it's being occupied.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? Appears not. Graham, do you want to give the recommendation?
Thank you, Chairman. The recommendation is at page 261 in the agenda pack, and it is that the report be noted.
Thanks very much for that.
Chairman, yeah, there are no contraindications, so that resolution's passed.
Thank you very much. Item 16, the forward plan. I hope members have observed this forward plan. It's at the back of the agenda. Any questions? Appears not. Graham?
Chairman, the recommendation is simply that the forward plan be noted. I can't see any members wishing to abstain or vote against that. Motion's carried.
Thank you very much. I believe that's the end of this agenda, Graham.
That's correct, Chairman.
Well, can I just say to particularly staff and members, we both worked together on this committee over the year, and can I just thank everybody for their contributions. It's been positive. But as Robin was saying, we've got to scrutinise the business, and I think we've done this very well with the help of members. And can I thank obviously the officers for all their hard work on it. So thank you, everybody. Robin and Wendy.
Yes, I shan't be standing again next year, so I wish the members that come next year can enjoy being part of this organisation. I've really enjoyed my time. I've been 2 sessions on this organisation, and I really have enjoyed meeting you and hearing your commitment to your work, and I think you're doing a wonderful job. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And best wishes to you, Wendy. Best wishes for the future.
Thank you very much.
Robin.
Yeah, and thank you, Chairman, and thanks for the note and the point that we are here to scrutinise. I think scrutiny is an important thing in life, and good rigour and scrutiny assists officers making better decisions and assist supporting them in their decisions. And that's really what a councillor's job is. And I think that's what we should do, as you said. And I thank the officers for their time in this period, what they've done. And we all look forward to the future and with open minds. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other member comments?
Councillor Hussain.
Oh, sorry, Wendy.
Sorry?
Wendy, got any other comments?
No, sorry.
Okay, Graham?
I think Councillor Hussain has indicated a wish to speak.
Councillor
Hussain? Thank you. Thank you. Just to thank Wendy, she done a great job, and I'm grateful that all the work she done for our ward, and I'm grateful. Wish her all well retirement. Thank you very much.
Yes, that's a good point. We're all miss Wendy. She's been a fantastic councillor. Any other points?
I'll miss Wendy. I just hope she misses me.
Of course, Robin.
You take care. You look after
Very
yourself.
Analytical member.
You take care, my love, and look after yourself, and all the best in whatever you do.
I think with the comments we've had between us members, we really been working together on this committee, and I do appreciate your support. So can I say thank you, everybody, and goodbye. May see you in the future. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.